Hey, JD.
It's a little harsh.
That's
Good
right.
morning. How are you doing, Pastor?
Doing good. Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. It's the Monday after Easter Sunday.
Yeah. It's a tire. We're still recovering.
Yeah.
Had a really busy day yesterday, but it was a good day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a busy weekend, but it's funny. There's something probably the people don't think about is Monday. Oftentimes, there's kind of like this funny hangover, kind of an adrenaline dump that happens on Sunday, and then you just kind of feel drained the next day. I
Yeah.
say hangover.
It's
I
like
don't-
a spiritual hangover. There
spiritual
you go.
hangover. Yeah. Hey, so Sunday was Skyrocket Church's first Easter service ever.
It was.
How did it go?
It went well. Yeah. It was great. The worship was absolutely fantastic. We had great people there. It was great having conversations. We had a good Easter egg hunt. It was our first Easter egg hunt, right? And so there were a few things that went wrong that won't go wrong for next year. But I'm trying to, it's a first time. It's our first Easter service.
Yeah.
So I was just excited to,
Absolutely.
excited to have it happen there. The thing that went wrong, so I'll go into specifics,
Okay.
is I advertised to everyone that, hey, we're starting at 11:30, right?
Right.
And then for some
The
reason,
egg hunt starts at
the
11.
egg hunt starts at 11:30, and then most people got there right like early, and people are waiting around, and all the kids are waiting and excited. And I got
Right.
caught up. I'm like, okay, let's just go, let's just do it, go. And then we sent people off early,
Oh, no.
and then more people showed up later. But the good thing was we still had eggs left over. So what we did is we did a round 2, and then we hit all the other eggs. So it ended up being okay. All the kids got eggs. It's just one of those funny things that new pastor, new church, first Easter. I didn't know. So
Yeah.
you learn stuff, you learn stuff, but we had tons of beautiful flowers, we had decorations. It was great to see people. I wore a collared shirt to church,
Wow.
right? Crazy stuff, but
Collared shirt. Wow. The bar was high.
the bar was high.
Yeah.
We showed out for Easter. So
That's
how was it
great.
here?
It was great. We had a super good day. Wow. Music was incredible. Of course, flowers and all that kind of stuff. Packed house. Egg hunt was a lot of fun. First time we've ever had egg hunt on a snowy field.
Yeah. Was there still snow on the field here?
Yeah. It wasn't totally covered, but
Yeah.
I was throwing snowballs at
Snow-
people, which was fun.
That's funny.
I've never done that at a Easter.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It was a good day.
What did you guys talk about during the service?
We talked about Jesus and the resurrection. Yeah. Yeah. So talked about Jesus and the resurrection, and really just the what I did is I took it from the Luke passage where
Me too.
did
We
ya?
didn't even talk about that, but we both took from Luke.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So the women come back from the tomb and they tell the disciples, and the disciples are like, "Yeah, this is unbelievable."
Yeah.
And so they're like, they don't believe it, and so I really kind of talked about how this news is really unbelievable.
Yeah.
When you think about on any human level, it's totally unbelievable. People don't come back to life. But at the same time, with God, everything is possible. And if God couldn't do it, then God's probably too small. Your God is probably too small if He can't
it's true.
do
Yeah.
the impossible. So yeah, it was. It's funny. You think about Easter Sunday, and there's always the pressure. Because it's the big show, people talk about it as that's our Super Bowl kind of thing. But it's not. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same news. It's the same message. It's just sometimes you have some visitors too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we believe in the living Jesus, and He's alive every day,
Yeah.
every day of the year.
Yeah.
But it's fun to celebrate it,
Absolutely.
on Easter.
Yeah. So what did you talk about?
Same thing. Took the passage from Luke, cut out the part where the disciples are on the road to Emmaus, but sort of just read through that whole last passage. But talked about a lot of the same stuff. So the first part is one of the first things we talked about is when the women approach the tomb. And then the angel says, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead?"
Yeah.
And the funny thing is these women are being completely logical, right? Like Jesus died. They're doing the ceremonial tradition of bringing spices, and perfumes to the tomb. So pretty much like putting flowers, like how we would take flowers to a grave. So they're pretty much like nowadays taking flowers to Jesus's grave. And then the angel's just like, what are you guys doing? Why are you looking for the living among the dead? And so it's sort of this like reversal of logic, that what's logical to us is just the opposite of God's logic. And so relating it to hope is we look for hope in dead places. We look for the living hope in dead places, whether that's someone's affirmation and love, like we try to make people love us and people like us, whether that's in hoping that that'll make everything okay. Like if I make this person love me, or if I get this group of people to like me, then everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
Or we put our hope into a political party or a certain political person, that if only this person, whether it's either side, if only this person, is in control, things are going to be better and the world's going to be better. Or we put our hope in, hey, if I get more money, if I get this job, then things are going to change. Anyways, we look for hope in all these dead places. And it might be logical to us, like it makes sense to us, but that's not how God works. Is, there's only one hope, and it's not a place, it's a person.
Yeah.
And he's walking around.
Huh. So as you were preparing your message, were you thinking of anybody in particular? Because I know I was when I was working through the message, and typically, I always try to think about, and I always try to write a sermon based on the people in the room, but I always try to do it in such a way that I'm thinking about what if somebody, what if they're skeptical, or what if, I always want to do it on a level that anybody can understand, whether, you're a child or, the whole way up, and I don't know. But anyway, as I was writing this message, I was thinking about, what about the skeptic? What about the person who looks at it and is like, yeah, actually, I totally get it. It is an unbelievable story, because it's, humanly, it really is. It's pretty absurd that Jesus rose from the dead.
Is there someone in particular that you were thinking about? Or you're thinking about sort of this arc? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, there, I have somebody in mind, whether it be a real person or whether it be an imaginary real person.
And that makes it real for you as you're writing, as you're writing the sermon.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, what if this person, and, it's funny because you never want to write a message thinking about a person, because that person will never be there.
Yeah.
That's just the way it goes. Well, I preached a sermon for him and he didn't show up.
Yeah.
But no, so you don't do that. But as I was thinking about it, then I came to the end and circled back to Thomas, who wasn't at the in the room when Jesus appeared to the disciples, and that's found in John chapter 20. And so Jesus appears to everybody, and they all understand he's alive.
Yeah.
But Thomas, he wasn't there. He missed it. And so I circled back to that and read that passage where he appears to Thomas and says, "Here, put your finger in my hand and put your hand in my side." And then he says, "Stop doubting and believe." And I think we have to have room to doubt, because our doubts, our concerns, they're real, because everything in life points to the fact that when you're dead, and you don't just rise back to life. And so I don't blame Thomas. I can relate to Thomas, but I know that probably the rest of humanity out there would side with Thomas.
Well, and not just Thomas gets a bad rap, and I think because all the disciples doubted. Like when the women came back and they said, "Hey, Jesus isn't there," they said, "This is an idle tale. Like this is a fairy tale."
Yeah.
Thomas, every single one of the disciples doubted, and these are guys who saw Jesus for 3 years and hung out with him. So if they all doubted, I think it's okay that all of us doubt too. And to be quite frank, like it's okay. It's okay to be completely doubtful and still barely hang on to hope. Like hope isn't something that, you can't doubt anymore now that you have hope. You can be full of doubt and fear and hold on to just a thread of hope, And so all the disciples, the reason they stopped doubting is because Jesus showed up and he was like, "Look at my hands and feet. I'm eating, which shows that I'm not a ghost. I'm a real human being, So that's why they stopped doubting. But they all doubted just like Thomas did. Every single one of the disciples, except for Peter, he had a little bit more hope. And so he starts running towards the tomb. Yeah. But even he has to see it for himself, And so I don't know. I'm a huge doubter at heart. And so I identify with Thomas, but I think I mean, doubting's at the core of everyone in the Bible, all the disciples, Thomas, and everything. It's totally normal to doubt these things. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm with you in that.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened for the disciples, they saw the unbelievable every day. For 3 years, they're following Jesus. They're seeing the unbelievable. He's healing people. He's casting out demons. He's multiplying bread and fish. He's walking on water. He's calming the sea. All that stuff. They saw the unbelievable, but they still didn't believe. I mean, it's just amazing how we can get maybe desensitized by the unbelievable or the sacred.
And to be fully honest with everyone listening, you would think, oh, we're pastors, we read the Bible, we're in church. I still doubt all the time, and I think that's okay. The disciples who, like you said, saw all this happening and they still doubt. It's okay to still doubt. Like, we all have spiritual highs and spiritual lows. The funny thing, and this is something I shared with my congregation at Skyrocket, it was a rough week hope-wise, and it was funny. It was so ironic that I'm in one of those periods. There's periods where you're seeing God's hand in everything, and you're riding that spiritual high. And then there's other periods where you're like, Jesus, help me to see what's going on here. Help me to see what you're doing. And then it's just crickets, and it's completely silent. But that's just how our interaction with God works. Is he's not a genie. We can't just snap and then boom, he shows up to appease our doubts. It's really up to his timing. And so while that happens, while we're in those discouraging moments, it's really okay to doubt. And one of the things I pointed out in the sermon, and it's just so, I don't know. It's a crazy process, writing sermons that, it's funny, this is what I'm dealing with this week. Because it's been a dry spell for me personally, like the last 2 or 3 months, where there was a period like 3 months ago where I was seeing God's hand in everything and feeling on a spiritual high, whereas recently it's been a lot harder for me to have hope. But it's funny reading this passage. It says that the disciples, when Jesus showed up, the disciples were startled. Yeah. And so what that means is they did not expect Jesus to show up, right? And so they were obviously praying like, Jesus, show up. Come on, what's going on? But Jesus didn't show up when they wanted him to. And so I don't know. I take hope and encouragement from that in the sense that Jesus, he will always show up in our lives. It's just not when we want and not necessarily how we want. And so sometimes it takes 3 days. Sometimes it's 3 years. Sometimes it's 30 years. But that's what hanging on by a thread with that hope. That's what the hope is for, is that we believe in the living God that will always show up, just not necessarily when we want him to or how we want him to.
Okay. So let's unpack that word. Maybe it's 2 words. Show up. Because sometimes I think God is there the entire time. Well, actually, I always think God's there, but he's quiet. He's silent. It's not like he needs to show up. It's just we just don't see him. We don't see his activity or feel. Okay, so what you're describing makes me think about that moment in time, and again, leave it to a preacher to run off on a tangent, right? But it makes me think about that moment when John the Baptist is arrested and he's sitting in the prison, and he sends his disciples to go ask Jesus, "Hey, are you really the one?" Because John had seen, he had baptized Jesus, and he'd seen the Spirit of God descend like a dove, and he heard a loud voice from God saying, "This is my son," all this stuff. And now he's in prison, and he's like, "Wait a minute, Jesus, are you the one?"
What's happening?
Yeah. John saw that, but it was like it was starting to fade, and it was like he was starting to forget it. And Jesus is like, it's really me. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It's hard to be human.
Yeah. It's totally normal for when we go through those dry periods where we can't see God's actions or we don't feel it. It's totally normal to start questioning things and fading. But I mean, we all experience it. Yep. We just got to hold on to hope. That's the beautiful thing, is we just hold on to hope.
Well, and it's we don't all just experience it. It's maybe it's the norm.
It is.
The norm is that we don't always feel God close.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's not close, because I believe he is. But the norm, we go through life and we have these high moments. I guess if it was all high, if every Sunday was Easter, it wouldn't be special, would it? I mean, so we live with Easter in mind, and I'm trying to philosophize. philosophize. Anyway, if every Sunday was Easter, then there wouldn't be anything special about every Sunday. But you have to have Good Friday too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, what else did you guys experience this week?
This week or on Sunday? Other stuff we talked about? Well, we sort of closed. Yeah, so talking about that, how God shows up. Oh, other thing. Another interesting thing is that the first thing Jesus says is peace be to you, right?
Yeah.
Which I just think that that's so comforting. You know, that when God, and I said it, when God shows up, God's always there. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
That God's always there, but when he shows up like actively, because sometimes I don't think it's our fault that we don't see God. I think sometimes God doesn't want to be seen, but when he shows up visibly that we're there, the first thing he proclaims over us is peace. And I don't know, I got a lot of comfort from that, is that he proclaims peace, then he shows he's real. He sort of says, hey, all these doubts are fine. And then he says, how we closed this week is, why? What's so important about resurrection? The two things is it's resurrection and forgiveness. And so when Jesus is talking through it, he's like, that the Christ would be crucified, that he would be resurrected. And so the two important things are resurrected and then preaching the forgiveness of sins to all nations. And so I think there's a hole within us that's the only thing that can fill our hole. We all have broken relationships. That's something a lot of us in Prescott, with our congregation, it has been a rough year, like a really rough year of loss. And so that was the person I was really thinking about as writing the sermon, is that many of us have lost family members and friends. Many of us have gone through really rough times, and loss this year. And so those two things, the forgiveness of sins, that Jesus saying, no, you don't have to be good enough. Like, I forgive you, now follow me. And then resurrection, that at the end of all things, Jesus has conquered the grave, and all things will one day be made whole. And I don't think there's one person on the face of this planet that doesn't sound like good news. Like, that's good news.
Yeah, right.
That's good news. And I don't know one person that would say that that's not good news, that's what the gospel's all about. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how we sort of closed it.
Yeah, so I touched on a little bit similar idea that these people who were terrified for their lives and they're hiding away in the upper room and they're afraid that they're next, or when they question Jesus, they have Jesus and they're questioning him about his disciples.
Yeah.
The high priest wanted to know, what are you telling those disciples? What about those followers of yours? And so they knew the target was on their back, and so they're terrified. And then suddenly something happens, the resurrection, we know because we get the rest of the story, but and suddenly they're not afraid anymore, and that's a sociological thing or psychological thing that even historians have noted, hey, something changed.
Yeah.
And whether, even if you don't believe that he was raised from the dead, they did.
Yeah.
They saw
their
something.
conviction was palpable. It was so real.
It was so real that it started this movement.
And I would say too that they might even have had fear, but whatever it was, you can be courageous and still have fear, but their desire to act on spreading this good news overcame all fear and anxiety of any personal harm that they might face.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
So I'm going to read the last part of that section. So he's talking to Thomas, and he says, put your finger here and look in my hands. This is from John chapter 29-ish, 27-ish. Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand in the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. My Lord and my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. And so I think I really like that last line. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me, because that's us.
Yeah.
That's you and me and anybody who has placed their faith in Christ, because we didn't get to put our finger in his wounds, and yet we believe. So
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. It's a hard thing, but it's a beautiful thing. That kind of belief and faith.
Yeah. So, what do you preach next? I mean, it's
haven't even thought about that yet. It's Monday.
I know. It's funny because you come through a week like that, and it feels like I've said everything I know. There's nothing else in the tank. And yet,
Well, and that's the thing, is that's what the gospel is like, this is what's at the core of the gospel is Easter, is resurrection,
Yeah.
you know? And so whatever else we preach next, it might be different, but it's going to be tied back to it, because
Sure.
if we're preaching anything besides that, you know, of Christ crucified and raised from the dead, then it's not the gospel. And so whatever we preach, I don't know. And you've been preaching a whole lot longer than I have. Even myself, in just the 1 year, 2 years I've been preaching, I've realized that there's a common thread through all these sermons. At least
Yeah.
I hope so. Because if there's not, then I'm just making stuff up, I feel like, you know. But it all is going to tie back to this. You know, whatever it is, whatever we talk about next, it all has to tie back to this,
Yeah.
because this is what it's all about.
Yeah, it has to be, or becomes some political agenda or social agenda or something else. And there are churches probably that do that, but that's not what we're called to do. You know, we're called to preach the gospel. And yeah. Well, great. It is Monday, and you're probably going to watch this on Tuesday or sometime other. But what happens on Monday? Excuse me. What happens on Sunday matters on Monday.
Hey, it matters on Tuesday.
Tuesday. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Have a great week, everyone.
Yep.